Imina Chantai Cinco na Legislature Guahan is back from recess. We are now on legislative concurrences. I am going to recognize on legislative concurrence, I'm going to recognize, I apologize, the clerk has informed me that we were on motions. The last motion was to recess. We've come back from that recess. We are on motions. Senator Sabina Perez.
To do as Masi, Madam Speaker, I would move to place several nominations on the session agenda.
On that, please proceed.
I would like to move to place on the agenda on the Committee on Revenue, Taxation, Environment, and Procurement, John Edward G. Elau to serve as a member of the Alcoholic Beverage Control Board with a recommendation to do confirm on the session agenda.
On that motion, hearing no objections, motion carries.
Thank you, Madam Speaker.
You're still recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I move to place from the Committee on Environment, Revenue, Taxation, and Procurement the nomination of Dean A. McGlutnia to serve as a member attorney of the Guam Banking and Insurance Board with a recommendation to do confirm on the session agenda.
On that motion, hearing no objections, motion carries. Senator Parrish, you're still recognized.
Situ Ismasi, Madam Speaker. I move to place on the agenda from the Committee on Environment, Revenue, and Taxation and Procurement the nomination of Leah Beth Nonaholawa to serve as a member as a Governor of Guam employee classified on the Guam Banking and Insurance Board with a recommendation to do confirm on the session agenda.
On that motion, hearing no objections, motion carries. Senator Paris,
Situ Ismasi, Madam Speaker. I move to place from the Committee on Environment, Revenue, and Taxation and Procurement Raymond A. Schnabel to serve as a member of the Guam Banking and Insurance Board with a recommendation to do confirm on the session agenda.
On that motion, without any objection, motion carries. Situ Ismasi, Senator Paris.
Situ Ismasi.
Senator Therese Terlaye, you are recognized on Joseph Borja.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I move to place the Committee on Health. I move to place from the Committee on Health, Tourism, Historic Preservation, Land, and Justice the nomination of Joseph M. Borja to serve as Director, Department of Land Management. With the I move to place that on the legislative concurrence file, Madam Speaker.
On the session agenda, Madam Senator? On the session agenda?
On the legislative concurrence file of the session agenda, yes.
Senator Regine, do you have a point of?
I don't know. That's why I was checking.
Madam Speaker, just a point of information. I believe the Committee on Rules just received the report. It's just been filed, so I'm not sure if MIS has had the opportunity yet to place this packet online. It was received. It did have the votes in to move forward. So I just need a second to see if the committee report has been placed online.
We will take a very brief recess. On the motion,
Madam Speaker, we confirm that it is online already?
Yes.
Thank you.
On the motion, any objections? Hearing none, motion carries. On the Senator Pt.2 Terlaye, you are recognized.
Jesus Masi, Madam Speaker. I move to place in the voting file from the Committee on Public Safety, Border Safety, Military and Veterans Affairs, Mayor's Council, Infrastructure, and Public Transit on the nomination of Renee K. Bora to serve as a member of the Guam Contractors License Board with the recommendation to confirm. And I just want to add also, Madam Speaker, and I want my colleagues to really just take a look at because, you know, in the beginning,
Senator Dispensa, Senator Pt.2, the motion was to put Reina K. Borja to serve as a member of the Guam Contractors License Board with the recommendation to do confirm. I will
Yes.
address that at this time, sir.
Yes.
On that motion, are there, So the motion was to place, it's just to place onto the voting file.
no, not to the voting file, to do confirm.
Yes, sir, on
It's
the
the
voting
same,
file to
yes.
do confirm. Yes, sir.
But Madam Speaker, I just wanted to add something because on the initial part, the Contractors License Board was nowhere on the assignment under my committee. And I just want to ask my colleague to take a look at page 69, and that would confirm that the Contractors License Board is under my committee. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I will take that as an announcement. Senator Pito Chalaisi Zusmasi, on that motion to place Reina K. Borja as a member of the Guam Contractors License Board, hearing no objections, motion carries. Vice Speaker, Majority Leader, you are recognized. Vice Speaker Nelson.
Sujas Masi, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, just to clarify, it was to place Reina K. Borja on the voting file.
The voting file, yes, ma'am.
Okay. Thank you, Madam Speaker. I move to place in the voting file from the Committee on Education, Air Transportation, and Statistics, Research and Planning on the nomination of Evangeline M. Cepeda to serve as a member for Guam Academy Charter Schools Council.
With the recommendation to, yes, on that motion, and that would, Majority Leader, that would be the discipline for the Guam, the general public's representative.
That's correct.
On the discipline. On
As
that
a
motion,
member with the general public representative, Madam Speaker.
yes, on that motion, hearing no objection, motion carries. Sijos Masi. Senator Terlahi, you are recognized.
Thank you, Madam
Therese.
Speaker. I move to place in the voting file from the Committee on Health, Tourism, Historic Preservation, Land and Justice the nomination of Leilani R. Flores to serve as a member of the Guam Land Use Commission with the recommendation to do confirm.
On that motion, are there any objections? Yes. Long. Thank you. Thank you. On the motion, are there any objections? Hearing none, motion carries. Senator, Vice Speaker Nelson, I'll recognize you. Majority Leader?
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I move to place in the voting file from the Committee on Education, Air Transportation, and Statistics, Research and Planning on the nomination of Marissa Q. Mears to serve as a member for the Guam Public Library System Board of Directors with the recommendation to do confirm.
On that motion, are there any objections? Hearing none, motion carries. As Vice Speaker Nelson, you are recognized.
Caesar Masi, Madam Speaker, I move to place in the voting file from the Committee on Education, Air Transportation, and Statistics Research and Planning on the nomination of Jesse Jukinga to serve as a member as a general public representative of the Guam Academy Charter School Council.
On that motion, are there any objections? Hearing none, motion carries. Senator Pt.2, I will recognize you at this time.
Sito Sumasya, Madam Speaker. I move to place in the voting file from the Committee on Public Safety, Border Safety, Military and Veterans Affairs, Mayor's Council, Infrastructure, and Public Transit on the nomination of Aleo C. Sablan to serve as a member of the Guam Regional Transit Authority Board of Directors with the recommendation to confirm.
On that motion, are there any objections? Hearing none, motion carries. Majority Leader, Vice Speaker Nelson, you are recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I move to place in the voting file from the Committee on Education, Air Transportation, and Statistics Research and Planning on the nomination of Jennifer B. Sanchez to serve as a member of the Guam Academy Charter Schools Council with the recommendation to do confirm.
On that motion, are there any objections? Hearing none, motion carries. Senator Perez, I will recognize you at this time.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I move to place on the voting file from the Committee on Environment, Revenue, Taxation, and Procurement on the nomination of John Edward G. Elau to serve as a member of the Alcoholic Beverage Control Board with a recommendation to do confirm.
On that motion, are there any objections? Hearing none, motion carries. Senator Perez, you're still recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I move to place on the voting file from the Committee on Environment, Revenue, Taxation, Procurement the nomination of Dean A. McLaughlin to serve as a member attorney, Guam Banking and Insurance Board with a recommendation to do confirm.
On that motion, are there any objections? Hearing none, motion carries. Senator Perez, I believe you have one more?
Two more.
Yes, please proceed.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I move to place on the voting file from the Committee on Environment, Revenue, Taxation, and Procurement the nomination of Leah Beth Naholawa to serve as a member on the Guam Banking and Insurance Board with the recommendation to do confirm. She's a representative for the Classified Government of Guam employee.
On that motion, are there any objections? Hearing none, motion carries. Please proceed, Senator Perez.
Saduz Masi, Madam Speaker, I move to place on the voting file from the Committee on Environment, Revenue, Taxation, Procurement the nomination of Raymond A. Schnabel to serve as a member of the Guam Banking and Insurance Board with a recommendation to do confirm.
On that motion, are there any objections? Hearing none, motion carries. Senator Teresa Laya, I will recognize you.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I move to place in the voting file from the Committee on Health, Tourism, Historic Preservation, Land, and Justice the nomination of Joseph M. Borja to serve as Director, Department of Land Management with the recommendation to do confirm.
Thank you very much, Senator Teresa. On that motion, are there any objections? Hearing none, motion carries. Ladies and gentlemen, we've exhausted the items on the on legislative concurrence. Yes. Yes, Senator Mary Torres, you are recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I have a motion to place another bill on the session agenda.
Senator, that would be a motion out of order. You were given the opportunity to place the bill when we were on motions. We just finished legislative concurrences, and now we're going into second reading.
Okay, may I
That
place,
motion is out of order unless you have the support of 8.
Can I then make a motion to go back into motions, please?
Notwithstanding the House rules. On that motion, is there an objection? No objection? Motion carries.
So, Madam Speaker, if I may proffer a motion to place another bill item on the agenda.
Please proceed with your motion and make your statement so I can ask the body.
Yes, it is Bill number 126-35LS, which is an act to add a new section 57107 to Chapter 57 of Title 10 Guam Code Annotated, relative to requiring the Department of Revenue and Taxation to establish an exceptions process for homeless individuals and unaccompanied homeless youth obtaining a Guam identification card, and to further citing this act as the Homeless Youth and Families Identification Act. Madam Speaker, this has been reported out of committee, and the committee report has been uploaded on the legislative website.
And Senator Mary Torres, that bill is bill as amended.
Correct, as amended by the Committee on Environment, Revenue and Taxation, and Procurement.
On that motion, is there an objection? Hearing none. Motion carries. Senator Amanda Shelton, you are recognized. At this time, Senator, we are on motions.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'd like to move Bill number 73-35, an act to amend Section 8105 of Chapter 8, Title 10, Guam Code Annotated, relative to revising the makeup of the Guam Council of Senior Citizens to reduce the number of members to better facilitate quorum and the effectiveness of the council. Onto the session agenda.
On that motion, are there any objections? Hearing none, motion carries. Ladies and gentlemen, we are now on second reading. I will entertain Bill number 159-35 COR. Senator Therese Terlahi, you are recognized.
Situs Masi, Madam Speaker. And I want to thank you for calling this session a little bit earlier than we had originally intended. And I want to thank, of course, all the members for their attention to these matters. That this particular bill, Bill 159-35 COR, is an act to amend Section 1101.5M and add a new subsection E to Section 1102.8, both of Chapter 1, Article 1, Title 26 of the GAR, relative to increasing emergency and temporary shelter capacity for children placed under the protective custody of Child Protective Services. And I would like to move that on to third reading, Madam Speaker, and I would also like to speak on the bill.
Please proceed, Senator Therese.
Thank you. This bill seeks to grant the Director of the Department of Public Health the discretion to waive the maximum capacity, which is currently set at 12, for group child care homes. This is especially for the emergency or temporary placement of children placed in protective custody of CPS, pending investigation and long-term solutions for their placement. Nothing in this bill is intended to lessen federal mandates in regards to the treatment of these children or to lessen the child to caretaker ratios that are currently set in place by law. Bill 159 will increase emergency shelter capacity so that CPS can get children at risk out of harm's way and off the streets if necessary, and into a home where they can sleep without fear of being sexually or physically assaulted, or where they can be properly cared for while permanent solutions are looked into. It will, the reason why it's urgent right now, Madam Speaker, is because we are very fortunate on Guam due to the foresight of those before us that Public Health was able to secure a grant of $1.4 million and with the help, of course, of the Regalo Foundation, they really moved the plans and got the federal funding and were able to build this children's group home, which is now called Iguma Minaasi Sister Mary Bridget Perez RSM. The current limit, of course, is 12, and so the building's almost done. It's expected to be completed by October, and if they're hoping to have children in there by October, they want to send out the RFP in advance of October so that the building doesn't sit idle and these children sit in harm's risk for even a day longer than they need to, Madam Speaker. So if we can increase the capacity by law, then they will be able to solicit people to run the shelter, such as we currently run our Ollie shelter. They will be able to solicit people to run the shelter, anticipating that the capacity of the shelter may exceed 12. That's really the goal, Madam Speaker. Of course, we've talked a lot in our public hearings and in the news about the shortage of foster care homes right now. And so this is really what impedes CPS's work in taking care of as many children as possible. They've run out of homes to put them in. The building is approximately 7,000 square feet. So Public Health was very comfortable with increasing its capacity. Their current facility, I don't know the square footage, but it's a regular-sized house in, and it currently holds 12. So I think they're really blessed to have this 7,000 square foot. We are all blessed that they have a 7,000 square foot facility and can bring in more children. The Regalo Foundation's efforts, of course, were led by former First Lady Christine Calvo. I want to acknowledge her here, and Sister Mary Bridget. Of course, the facility is named after her because she ran these shelters for many years. Currently, Catholic Social Services is the vendor that's been contracted with the Public Health to run the Ollie shelter, which has been at capacity always. And so their capacity is 12. And the plan is that for Public Health that they are going to run Ollie shelter and run this shelter also. That's the need that we have right now on Guam. There's an estimated 35 children on the foster home wait list and an estimated 294 children living homeless right now. Again, Madam Speaker, I hope that answers the questions, or I'm open to any questions, but I asked my colleagues, and I want to thank, of course, my co-sponsor, Senator Mary Torres, and the Senator Shelton, who is the committee chair who held the hearing on this bill for their expedient work on this bill. And I want to thank my women colleagues from the past legislature, because in the past term, they really, we really helped each other to go and see these issues firsthand as much as we could and to struggle, and they really did. I think we're still working on it. This is one of these, it's a great accomplishment for Guam to have a facility like this, but it also reflects on a huge issue that is not solved by a facility like this, and that is that we actually have these children that are homeless and all of the contributing factors to that, or children that are suffering abuse in their homes. Those are things that this bill does not solve. It really just creates a remedy while we continue to do the big work on the major issues that are really driving these problems on Guam. So I don't want anyone, it's not a celebration, but it is really an accomplishment that I want to congratulate Public Health on and thank all my colleagues, and I hope for your support. Sizus Masi, Madam Speaker.
Buen provecho, Senator Therese Terlahi. Senator Tello Taitagui, I will recognize you on the main motion.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, for the opportunity to speak on Bill 159-35. Madam Speaker, I attended the public hearing on this bill, which included testimonies from former First Lady Christine Calvo and Sister Bridget, as well as the representatives from the Department of Public Health and Social Services. As we all know, the individuals who spoke on Bill 159 are very familiar with the issues of foster care and the lack of accommodations that is so desperately needed. There are over 260 foster children, and there are 37 foster families registered and a few shelters that house these children for a short period of time. Example, Sanctuary Alley Shelter are among them. Altogether, these families and shelters care for more than 100 children. And prior to that, I just said there were 260 foster children in the system right now. So there is a desperate need. for this. I stand in full support of this bill. However, I do want to make a note of the testimonies that were provided by Sister Bridget and the former First Lady Christine Calvo, which I thank the previous speaker for recognizing their efforts. This has been going on for almost 8 years. 8 years. When First Lady Christine Calvo, former First Lady Christine Calvo, saw the need for this. And we all opened our hearts to that. That's 8 years ago, to finally having a home, a facility to be put up. And so, Madam Speaker, in both their testimonies, it was stating, requesting for this legislature to help fund this foster care facility, the Guam Maasi foster care facility. So, Madam Speaker, I humbly ask all those who are going to vote for this bill today, that if by voting for this bill, you also have to support the funding needed to open this facility. And the only way to put out an RFP is to ensure that we have the money to do so. So I ask my colleagues to please support Bill 159, but most especially to support the funding needed to open up this foster care facility. Thank you, and Madam Speaker, I kindly ask, and the sponsor as well, if I could also be a sponsor of this legislation, and she agreed, so hopefully she'll remember that on the closing. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
You're very welcome, Senator Taitagui. Anybody else on the main motion? Senator Regine Lee, you are recognized.
Sujus Masi, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I rise in support of this legislation, but I do have a few questions for the author, if she'll yield. I first just want to take the moment to thank the author, to thank Senator Torres, who's a co-sponsor, and all of the members of the Women's Caucus from the 34th. There were 5 of us in last term, and I'm proud to say that we've doubled those numbers in this legislative term. But I think the most important focus was, just as the author had mentioned, that we work very diligently and work unified to get our children out of harm's way. And so I'm really glad that this bill is before us today and we have the opportunity to discuss it. One of the questions that I had for the author, if she'll yield, in my review of the bill, I was just curious as to what legal authority actually sets these maximum capacity limits of 6 and 12. So if we were struggling to look through the testimony, to look through the bill itself, we bounced back between GAR and GCA, and we were unable to find the legal authority that kind of sets that max capacity limit of 6 and 12. So if the author would yield.
Sijos Masi, Senator Regine Lee. Senator Terlahi, would you like to yield to that?
It's a very good question, Madam Speaker, because in trying to figure out also where they got this maximum capacity, we really, they seem to implement, well, we're amending these rules, of course, in the GAR, the Guam Administrative Rules and Regulations, but we're also, but they also just implement their programs in accordance with that, and it's a combination also of environmental health. So they have some environmental health rules that they implement when they are inspecting facilities such as this, and those are all also at public health. But they are in agreement that amending this rule would give them, or these rules, sorry, there's 2 of them, would give them the authority to increase that capacity no matter what other rules were preventing that.
Sijos Masi, Senator Therese, does that answer your question, Senator Lee?
Yes, Madam Speaker, but maybe 2 additional questions, follow-on questions from that response. So the good author of the bill had mentioned that environmental health laws and environmental health policy are some of the things that kind of predict these maximum caps of 6 and 12. And so I just wanted to see if there are other aspects of our law that also kind of help to determine how these limits are set?
Senator Therese, would you like to answer?
No, I think we've hit the nail on the head, I hope, with pinpointing these two regulations, particularly the one that says 12 in it, and then adding that the director may go over that. That's what we're doing by, it currently says not more than 12, and then we allow them to go over that. But that's really what controls the 12. I was just going to add that when the capacities of shelters are also dictated because of this relationship between caretaker and number of people in there, children. And so this doesn't affect that. So they will still need as many caretakers as are required in the ratio that currently exists. I think it's 4-to-1, if I remember correctly. That's going to continue. But there's no other law that I think we need to change except for this one to allow them to exceed 12.
Thank you, Senator Therese. Senator Lee, you're recognized.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker, and that does answer my question in terms of it's important to have a shell and a facility to house these children, but if we don't have those professionals, those caretakers that are able to provide those services to these kids, then it really, our work is only halfway done. And so I appreciate that response from the author. One thing that I did want to ask as well, if the author would yield, if the max of 6 or 12 is waived, in my mind, I still feel like there should be a cap or some sort of limit relative to the health and safety of these children. And so is the author contemplating like a max limit in terms of max capacity of not just the existing shelter that we're discussing today, but if we're changing the law, this would be kind of a max capacity for any shelter that we might not be contemplating for the future?
Again, Madam
Thank
Speaker,
you, thank you, Senator Lee. Senator Therese, would you like to answer?
I do yield, yes, and that is another excellent question because that is what we struggled with. We don't want to just increase it for any facility at any time, so we were very careful to narrow it, and everybody involved seemed to be comfortable. CPS, the Director of Public Health, and we were putting a lot of discretion in the Director of Public Health, admittedly. That's where it's going to lie, in her discretion to exceed that capacity. And it was a good example because the Ollie shelter that currently has 12, I don't think anybody would agree to put more children in there right now. And because it's full. And but this 7,000 square foot facility, I don't think anybody would limit it to 12. You know, it doesn't seem practical. And especially when we have that great need of 200 some children out living without a home. So, yeah, it's a good question, and you have to decide where that. We left it with discretion. We didn't want to maximize the cap because it's a 7,000 square foot facility. Oh, and it shifts a little bit. Like if you have babies, then you need a room for babies, and if you have no babies, you can put more toddlers. So it depends on the age group of who's in the home as to how many rooms you need, how you're going to divide them, and all those rules are still in place as to if you have a baby, if you have babies, they have to be in their own room. They can't be combined with anyone else. And if you have certain age groups and you have boys, have to be separated from girls. All those other rules are still intact, and so that's why I couldn't set a cap either, because you don't know the size of facility, and this facility may actually shift, we might shift the rooms. And so I didn't want to say, 20 children when you can have more if they're just babies or, something like that. I hope that helps to explain. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Senator Therese. Senator Lee.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. And again, I want to thank the author of this legislation. That's a very thoughtful response. And I agree. I think that in terms of the Ali shelter, we hear that shelter and the great people that were working there are often working above and beyond their capacities many times, and it just breaks their hearts to have to turn anybody away. So I think this bill represents an opportunity for us to provide relief to Ali shelter, to decrease the amount of hopefully we won't have to separate siblings, because many times that's an issue. And I served on the board of Sanctuary Incorporated for many years, and sometimes this is some of the things that we would encounter. We have certain limits in terms of age to be accepted into our shelter at Sanctuary, but every once in a while we would be often asked, or the executive director would be asked to waive in order to accept a sibling maybe 1 year younger or a few months younger than our actual age limits. And so I think it's important that in this regard that we do have some flexibility, and it does help me to rest a little bit easier knowing that Department of Health and Human Services would be the ones to kind of make that determination. And so I think that's really important. And again, I stand in support of this legislation, and I thank the author and the co-sponsor very much for moving this forward and for allowing us to have this discussion today. Situas Masi.
Buen provecho, Senator Lee. Senator James Moreland, you are recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I am in favor of this bill for the increasing the emergency and the temporary shelter capacity for the children placed under the protective custody of the Child Protective Service, under the discretion of the Department of Public Health and Social Service to determine those numbers. So I'm in full support of this bill, and I also request from the author to be added as a co-sponsor. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Senator Moylan, does that end your remarks? Does that end your remarks?
Yes.
Oh, sorry.
Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you. Speaker Barnes, you are recognized.
Situas Masi, Madam Speaker, for giving me the opportunity to rise in support of this bill 159-35 COR. I do want to take the time to thank the good senator from Jonia for literally seeing the vision and working closely with Sister Bridget. And if I may, Madam Speaker, add some history to this building. And as we look at the numbers of the reported care that is needed, and you see the number of over 270 children needing foster care and what's available today. When the vision came to us in this august body, literally 8 to 10 years ago, Sister Bridget, Mary Bridget, was literally pleading and asking and working with the Guam Housing Urban Renewal Authority, working closely with the legislature, and the difficulty of even just trying to build a home for our foster care children. It wasn't till we literally got together and the introduction was done, and even the place. We had talked, Madam Speaker, that this house for our foster children would be in the village of Tamuning, and it came with some major concern, and being able to work with Gura and the oversight chair of housing at that time, our committee was really wanting to make sure that Sister Bridget and her team, that the concerns were brought up, but more importantly, even working with CPS at the time, the agencies came together. And Madam Speaker, I want to share that after everything was said and done, we finally were going to proceed with the building and the new location would be at Barragata Heights. So it didn't stop there. The nonprofit organization with the Regalo Foundation said that they were committed on moving these efforts forward, working closely again, continuing to work with Sister Bridget even after her retirement because she set the vision to making sure that we take care of our children, and the need for emergency care and shelter for these children was literally still in her heart and was a priority. So I want to say that Sister Bridget and all the sisters in her team that never stop caring and wanting to make sure the children are protected. But yes, this body who literally took the time, the good senator from Tamuning talked about the 34th Guam Legislature seeing the vision as a woman caucus. And again, now we're in the 35th. So as you see the progression, Madam Speaker, it was the women who refused to stop, fight, not to quit, and to continue to make sure that this house for our children will be there for their care, and the shelter would be provided. But Madam Speaker, there was a mention about sustaining the home, providing for the expertise, and moving forward. And I have to share that the commitment from this body is to make sure that the sustainability of this program moving forward to protect our children will continue to be at the forefront as mothers, as godmothers, as grandmothers who truly have it in their hearts to nurture the care to protect these children who cannot care for themselves. So I stand in full support and thank the good author from Jonya and the other senator from Tamuning to have this bill 159-35 COR introduced, and we are here at this journey to complete that process. And I am hoping that all our colleagues in this 35th Guam Legislature votes for this effort. So, Undankalan Sizos Masi for giving me the opportunity to speak in support. Sana Masi.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Is there anyone else that would like to be recognized on the bill? Senator Kelly Marsh Taitano.
Sainama Asi, Speaker. I also want to stand in support of the bill. I too had been concerned about whether there were any caps in place, because at the heart of that are the rights of the children, and we wanted to make sure, or I wanted to make sure, that that was of due consideration. And so I really appreciate that that question was asked and fully answered, and that the answer was also provided that there are a variety of types of guidelines and policies that the director will be following in determining both the waiver, but then the maximum capacity. Those things I think are extremely important, especially because the the children, as mentioned in the testimony, they may be going through situations of a lot of stress. They may be dealing with a lot of emotions and other situations where their rights really need to be protected. All of those things really need to be considered. And so it was very reassuring to hear from the author of the bill assure us all that there were basically a plethora of guidelines that were going to be followed. So I just wanted to be able to stand and provide my support and just really underscore that those safeguards are in place when we're talking about our children. It is something that I feel very close to. There are several members of my family. I have several cousins that are from situations like this that have been adopted into my family, and so I really feel close to the issue and know from experience that it can make all the difference in the life of a child. Sujus Masi.
Buen Pt.2, Senator Marsh Taichino. Anyone else on the main motion? Senator Amanda Shelton, and then Senator Louise.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I rise in support of this bill, and I thank the author and the co-sponsor for introducing this legislation. As we've heard, over the last several months, we've had roundtables on foster care. We've had these different public hearings for these foster care bills, and we heard in these when foster children don't have a place to go, sometimes social workers from CPS take them home themselves. And there have been situations when foster children have had no place to go and they've been placed in the Department of Youth Affairs in the Youth Corrections Facility, having, not committed any crime, but just because they are foster children. And this is a type of situation that can be extremely traumatic when foster children are already going through so much and coming from situations of abuse and neglect. And the current president of the Foster Family Association, Kathleen Thomas Beneventi, she was a foster child herself. This was a situation that she experienced personally. And the more that we can do to keep foster children out of the Department of Youth Affairs from the Youth Correctionals Facility and put them in a home or even into a group home, that's moving in the right direction. Foster children, they need this stability in their lives in order to be able to grow and to thrive, because stability and safety and security is what they are already lacking. So again, I thank the good author for this legislation, and I ask that all of our colleagues please support this bill. Thank you.
You're very welcome, Senator Shelton, Legislative Secretary. Senator Luis Muñoz, you are recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise in support of this bill as well, and want to acknowledge, too, as a part of the previous Women's Caucus in the 34th Legislature, and acknowledge that in our discussions prior to with the CPS at Department of Public Health and Social Services, there were just their passion for taking care of the children, as the previous speaker just said, that because of their passion to take care of kids, they even take the kids home. You could see they were worn, they were torn, they didn't know what to do and where to go. And with the former First Lady, Christine Calvo, with the Regalo Foundation, I acknowledge her too as well for bringing this foster home project to fruition, and acknowledge all of the females, ladies in this 35th Legislature to fully support the foster care children, because it has been proven, Madam Speaker, that with a loving home, they can grow to become successful members of the community. So once again, Madam Speaker, I rise in support of this measure, and I really thank the author, and then look forward to all of our colleagues' support too. Thank you very much.
Senator Muñoz. Anyone else on the main motion? If not, Vice Speaker Nelson, Majority Leader, you are recognized.
Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I would just like to rise in support of this bill. Last term was a very awakening moment for me with several of my colleagues, and I visited the homeless shelters and also examined the abandoned home that a little girl was raped in. In response to that, I want to acknowledge the hard work that all of my female colleagues have done last term on the 34th Guam Legislature in trying to find solutions to help the homeless and the children who are suffering because of the circumstances of their parents. This is a very grave situation on our island, and I'd like to commend the sponsor of this bill for the innovative approach to helping address the needs of the children that are suffering, the innocent that are suffering. And I also want to state for the record that I look forward to the budget appropriation to ensure that this bill works in our upcoming session and to ensure that this bill be funded, even though it is not stated out in the bill itself. And if I may ask to also be a co-sponsor of the bill. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Sizu Smasi. I will have Senator Pt.2, you are recognized.
Thank you very much, Senator San Agustina, and I know you still remember that I'm older than you, so thank you very much. Madam Speaker, I rise in support of this particular bill. Sa megay, anay dumadang kluzo na ulilids ti say pamagoon ni timan matetindi. Uno na timan matetindi sa manhanoy sa nanya, manmatay sa nanya. Zazaw na bidangklo, benay dangklo na si Jesus Mahasi, na si iya ako. Si Senator Therese Terlay, niyesti na bonitong bill. Sa estigi, Madam Speaker, mo na fandadanayit kung mo mantao to itatawit na Igwinayjata kuntra itautauta, igwinayjata kuntra ifamagonta, igwinayjata kuntra manenata, igwinayjata puri itanota. Za enige muna 3 kilo hininggeta, muna 3 kilo esti na ininggeta todo i mandadanait kumu mansamoro, kumu mantauto esti tatakumpendi, inilala gwinigitanota. Za dongkulo na si Jesus Mahasi na malangno sa esti na biyo sa tanisisita admam na tempo ifamagonta man madisatendi. Za esti na malangno sa esti na biyo za pwede sina muna ta kontinua esti na klasin soto ipara ta kontinua majuda itu siya imunisisita judo. Si Jesus Mahasi, Madam Speaker.
Buen provecho, Senador Pt.2. Senator Joseph Augustine, on the main motion, you are recognized.
Madam Speaker, I also rise in support of this bill. My colleagues on the ladies' side, they said they rise because their parents, their mothers, their grandmothers, well, I know for a fact Senator Chalai and I are the only one that probably are grandparents on the men's. The rest of them are just parents. So in support of our children, the same concept should apply like they did on the Department of Education. No child left behind. And I believe with this motion, no child will be left behind. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Sizu Smasi, Senator San Augustine. Anyone else on the main motion? If not, Senator Therese Terlahi, you may close.
Well, Madam Speaker, I want to thank my colleagues for their support. I hope that CPS, who's on the front lines, can feel that, and that the foster families who have already opened their homes to these children can feel that, and that the Homeless Coalition, who works so very hard and is so concerned about these children who are out there, that they can feel the support of the legislature and really the personal feelings of all my colleagues. I want to just ensure everyone that this bill is going to deal with group homes, and this is different than a family foster home. So a family foster home has currently the capacity of 6. And currently these group homes, that they're not the traditional family settings, and they're limited to 12, but they are, so you're not placing a child kind of permanently in these homes, supposedly. That's the theory. They're not supposed to be placed permanently here. They're even not supposed to be placed longer than 90 days. But the Ollie shelter has kept many children over 90 days because of the lack of foster homes. So I want to make that very clear, that we are still in huge need of foster homes, that I want to thank again those who have opened their houses so generously, but that we will continue to need that, because we do not want this. We're not trying to create an orphanage where the children will stay there forever and ever. So as much as we can, if our community can pull together, we want to just create a temporary shelter where they can transition out into permanent placement, where we can help their families to recover and bring their children back home, get homes where they can bring their children to, or that we can move these children into homes where they can have some permanent safety, some more stability, like my earlier colleague said. Stability really is the key. All the professionals were consistent in their testimony that stability is the key for these children, and lots of love, consistent love. And so before I close, I'd also like to just make a call out for any assistance that these foster families can get, I think is much appreciated. Any donations that the Ollie Shelter can get is much appreciated. Any donations that Public Health can get in their setting up of this brand new 7,000 square foot facility. I think the Regalo Foundation is accepting donations on their behalf of furniture and other things. So I would just, our community's always been very generous, and we've heard many people talk about the homeless children that we see and how it pains us to see this, and so just that's one area where you can donate if you and hopefully directly affect those children. Again, I want to thank you, Madam Speaker, and my colleagues, and I want to ask, and if I could put some co-sponsors on this bill, yes. and I would like to ask that we put Senators Lee and Nelson and Taitugui, Senator Munya, who was also with and Senator, of course, you, Madam Speaker. And I remember when they, had to do a bill to transfer this land from the Chamorro Land Trust. So I also want to acknowledge that the Chamorro Land Trust gave up this prime property on the top of Barragata Heights for this beautiful place to raise children. And thank you, and previous legislatures for your efforts in that regard. And Senator Moylan, Madam Speaker, I would also like him to be a co-sponsor, and actually everybody, because they're all so very supportive, and I know that the Appropriations Chair has also been very, very helpful. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you. On that motion to place, as the names were mentioned, and then the rest of the colleagues, are there any objections to be added on? Hearing no objections, motion carries, and to place it on the voting file, Senator, on the motion to place on the voting file, hearing no objections, motion carries. Colleagues, next on the agenda is Bill 140-35, and I understand the good senator of OFB wants to move to set aside. Senator San Augustine, on the motion just to set aside, and we'll proceed with, please.
Yes, Madam Speaker. We can set aside 140 until tomorrow at 10, so that we can go into committee of the whole in reference to that. Thank you.
So I'm going to move to set aside. We'll still proceed on the motion to set aside at this time without any objections. Motion carries. Next on the agenda is Bill number 135-35 COR. Senator Mary Torres, I will recognize you at this time.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, Bill number 135-35 is an appropriate bill to follow what we just entertained in the form of Bill 159. Bill 135-35 is an act to add a new Article 9 to Chapter 1, Division 1 of Title 26, Guam Administrative Rules and Regulations, relative to permitting more than 6 children per foster home in the standards for family foster homes on Guam, and to further add such updated standards reflecting this allowance to the GAR. This bill, similar to 159...
Senator Torres, if I may, if you can just complete the
me,
last sentence and just finish the title, And
Yes.
we'll move it to the third reading, and then I'll let you discuss, please. If you can
I
make that
guess I'm
motion.
so anxious. I was excited about Bill 135. Madam Speaker, excuse me, I move to place 135-35 on the third reading file, and if I may be so permitted to discuss.
Yes. So moving bill number 135-35 COR to the third reading, and you are now allowed to speak. Si Diyos masi. Consigue mo na, por favor.
So that first statement was just practice. But 135-35 is a very appropriate companion bill to 159 because it addresses what we all know to be an urgent need in our community. The crisis that we're dealing with right now is the unacceptable number of children that are without permanent homes on Guam. According to Child Protective Services, there are currently 276 children in foster placement. This was the most recent figure that was provided to us by the director, Linda Denorsi, of Public Health. In fact, at the public hearing that we had, Linda Denorsi emphasized the urgent need by stating, and I quote, BOSA, which is Bureau of Social Services and Administration, continues to have difficulties finding foster homes for children that need placement. Many of these children have been residing at the shelters we commonly know as Pt.2 shelter and sanctuaries co-ed facility, some for as long as 14 to 18 months because there are no foster homes available. So what Bill 135-35 does is it'll help remedy this by allowing a licensed foster family to take in more than the children that are currently allowed in our standards, which is 6. And this is the caveat, though, so long as it is approved by the Bureau of Social Services and Administration. This is a common practice in several states in the United States presently, and more so, the latest guidelines proposed by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services also recommends permitting families to take in more than 6 children, and it is mostly to help keep siblings together. Many people who testified at the public hearing spoke to this very critical part of sheltering children in foster care, and I'd like to speak to this point. Child Protective Services currently makes every effort to place siblings together when they are removed from their family's home. But due to the current standards limitation, it's sometimes difficult, especially when there's large sibling groups. As a result, there are 128 siblings living in separate placements because there are not enough foster homes to accommodate them in one home. Director Denorsi described it in great detail, the psychological effect this has on our children. And I'd like to read, because I think it's very important to appreciate this aspect of keeping families together. And I'll quote from her testimony. Separating siblings, whether they are temporary or permanently removed from their parents, can severely intensify grief and trauma. In some cases, sibling separation can be more traumatic than separation from their parents. Separating siblings makes it difficult for foster children to begin the healing process, make attachments, and develop a healthy self-image. Older siblings can be comforters, role models, and best friends to their younger brothers and sisters. No matter how close they are, most siblings share years of experience that form a bond and a common foundation they do not have with anyone else. Because of the affection they share, siblings may feel they have lost part of themselves when separated. However, if they are placed together, they can help each other process the past and remember common experiences. We leave this discretion to expand the limit of 6 children per household to the department because they recognize, and the department will recognize that for some families, clearly 6 children will be too many. But we also know, and some people who testified at the public hearing recognize that There is no one-size-fits-all formula. So what we were sure to do is, rather than just opening it up, we wanted to amend the current limit to give the Bureau its rightful discretion to determine on a case-by-case basis the best interests of the child and the family that is caring for them. I also want to add that in the public hearings, this discretion was so important that it was further requested by Guam's foster families who came, that it also be applied to the number of children under the age of 2. Right now, the standard says that at no time should there be more than 4 children under the age of 2, including the foster parents' children. So what I'd like to do, Madam Speaker, is proffer an amendment to page 9, line 2. And I've passed out a copy of the amendment. I believe my colleagues have a copy. So the amendment that I want to proffer would be to read on line 2 of page 9. At no time should there be more than 4 children under the age of 2, including the foster parents' children, unless approved by the Bureau. And again, what this does is it just adds another layer of discretion to the Bureau to decide.
Thank you, Senator Torres. On that motion, anyone wishing to speak? Are there any objections? Senator Bisco-Lee, I will recognize you on the amendment.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. No objection. I actually just rise in support of this amendment. That was one of the concerns that I had with the bill, but I'm really glad that the author of the bill has proffered this amendment to just allow us a little bit, an additional oversight by the Bureau to ensure that we're keeping everything into account in terms of the environmental and health protections of our foster families and the children that they serve. Thank you.
Anyone else on the main amendment? Are there any objections? Hearing none. Motion carries on. Senator Torres, you're still recognized. You still have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'd also like to proffer a second amendment to line 13, page 8.
Please proceed.
And this would be to amend section 1902.5D to read, all notices required under this section to be provided shall be made by registered mail, and to add electronical mail with confirmed receipt or personal service.
Thank you. On that amendment, are anyone wishing to speak? Any objections? Hearing none. Motion carries. Senator Torres, you still have the floor.
I'll reserve any comments, Madam Speaker, to my closing. Thank you.
Senator Torres. On the main motion, I'll acknowledge Senator Telo-Tadigui.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, for the opportunity to speak on Bill 135-35. Madam Speaker, as I did my research on Bill 135, I noticed that through the Guam Code Annotated, had very little to say about foster care homes and the rules and regulations in the law, Guam law. However, in GAR, if you look at the section in GAR as well, it had very little to do with the foster care homes. In fact, in the section of Article 1, Chapter 26 in GAR, Section 1101.2, it states here that these rules and regulations are applicable to the following child care license, public and private: 1, child care facility, and 2, group child care homes. B, these rules and regulations do not apply to the group family home, family care, child care home, family foster home, and residential treatment facilities. So that being said, by by not applying to that, Bill 135 does create this. It creates an article that puts down the rules and regulations that govern these foster care homes and the requirements of individuals who want to be foster care parents. Madam Speaker, as well, I was there during the public hearing on Bill 135. And many people were there to testify in favor of it, particularly two individuals who've been foster care parents for many years. One of them had a very touching story, Madam Speaker, about the forgotten boys. She has children of her own, and after they had gotten older and flew the nest, she'd been keeping an eye on this one article about 5 children with special needs. So by the time she was able to get her license and get approved to become a foster care individual, she was able to be a foster care parent to the last 2 individual children, who she calls the forgotten boys. I think, Madam Speaker, during that time we were pretty much all in tears listening to that story. But Madam Speaker, being a foster care parent is very difficult. And it takes every one of us to support that individual. An entire community needs to be positive, bring a good positive attitude toward people who are becoming foster parents, as well as taking directions from them, from their experience. So, Madam Speaker, I stand in support of Bill 135. And I have a few amendments I would like to make based on some of the comments that were made during the public hearing. As well as I did my research looking online as well on other states and what they do. And Madam Speaker, it's kind of ironic because some states allow 5, some states only allow 4. Colorado, if I'm not mistaken, only allows 4 individuals to be in a foster care home, while other states allow 7 and some 6. But Madam Speaker, the first amendment I would like to proffer is the amendment, I guess it's amendment page 4, beginning on line 14. And this was based on a comment that was made by one of the foster care parents, Helen Middlebrook. And it says, even with her, her explanation of it, it does make some sense. You're having individual people take care of their children. And in most states, Madam Speaker, the age to be a foster care parent is 21. So what my amendment does, Madam Speaker, it just simply makes an amendment to page 4, beginning on line 14, letter C, a single person who is, strike out 18, 21 years or older may apply to become a foster parent by filing an application with the Bureau. This would also include single parents 21 years or older. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
On that motion, the amendment, anyone wishing to speak? Senator Mary Torres, you are recognized.
Madam Speaker, my only caution as I look at this amendment and others that follow is the intent of the bill is very specific to amending the standards for family foster care, foster homes on Guam, which was a result of a public law that was passed in 1977, but never made it into the GAR. So there, it's twofold. One is to amend it slightly to give discretion, and secondly to place it where these standards were formerly a floating document as an appendix to a public law to actually put it in the GAR so it's easily found, easily referenced, and all of that. But my concern with this type of amendment is it's going beyond what the intent of the bill is. And also, while I understand and I fully appreciate the recommendation to raise the age, what we have to be mindful of is that the discretion, just because you apply doesn't mean you automatically get. The discretion in the application is up to the Department of Public Health to determine the suitability of the applicant to be a foster parent. Also, let's also keep in mind that under these certain circumstances, while 18 might seem way too young and irresponsible, there may be a situation, for example, where an 18-year-old is enlisted in the military, has a family, and is capable of taking in a foster child. Perhaps it's a relative, perhaps, which is also, one of the preferences in foster care placement. So there may be situations that are ideal within the discretion of the department. And so I would think that although we want to make it best and consider best practices, that because there's no absolute prescription that someone who's 18 will in fact or should get selected as a foster care home, that there is no harm in keeping it as is, because it only gives further discretion and further options for the Bureau of Public Health and Social Services, to determine placement of children or which homes are appropriate. And the only example I can think of is that type of an example where you might have that situation, and somebody who's willing to accommodate, is settled and willing to accommodate a relative in need, for example. So I would in that vein, I would object to this amendment, not because I disagree or think that it's not a good effort, but only because I think that if we were to go and start amending the rules and regs specifically to this, it goes against the spirit of the bill, which was the bill amended only insofar as giving discretion, but it didn't really go into the heart of changing things so rigidly. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Torres. Anyone else on the amendment? If not, Senator Tello, would you like to close?
Thank you, Madam Speaker. The spirit of the legislation is to create rules and regulations, and that's what we're doing. Now, this amendment came from a parent, a foster care parent, who's been in the system for over 11 years. When it was brought up during the public hearing about changing it to 21, there was no one in objection about it. Now, I do understand we allow the director to make that decision when anybody applies to be a foster parent, and they thoroughly look through that. But Madam Speaker, I think that the age of 21 gives it a little bit more parental, experience or guidance as we allow these children to go into homes. In other words, we don't want to leave room for mistakes. That's why rules and regulations are put into place. We do as much as we can to put into place where there are no loopholes or any room for error. We're dealing with children here, children. So I think the age of 21 is a good age, and I believe Mrs. Middleton was right. Helen was right with that. And looking online, you see that most states are 21. Rules and regulations that we put together are put together so there's no loopholes and do the best we can. We are not perfect, but we're required to do our best to ensure that mistakes are not made. that we have to come back to this body and create, correct that, because there's too many mistakes being made in the future. So, Madam Speaker, the spirit of the bill is to create rules and regulations, like I said. And this rule and regulation, by creating it at 21, doesn't allow for any loopholes or any issues that may come up. It brings responsibility to those we consider who's old enough to drink at 21. If we're old enough to drink at 21, I think that's a good age to be responsible for a child. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Madam Speaker, could I ask for a 1-minute recess, please?
Thank you. Well, we will be in recess for a moment. Y minuto 35 na legislature ng Guam is back from recess. Before we took the moment's recess, we were with Senator Tello Tadegui. Senator Tadegui, you still have the floor. I'll address you at this time.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, the amendment that I proffered that was objected to, I decided, Madam Speaker, to withdraw my amendment. And first, I'd like to withdraw my amendment.
On the motion to withdraw the Senator Tello Tadegui amendment, no objection, motion carries. I'll still give you the floor, Senator Tadegui.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, well, I'm going to need, actually, I'd like to proffer an amendment on page 4, beginning on line 14. And this amendment, Madam Speaker, is letter C. A single person who is 21 years or older may apply to become a foster parent by filing an application with the Bureau. This would also include single parents 21 years and older, unless provided as a special case by the Bureau. So, Madam Speaker, what this bill does is it incorporates a section of it. Oh, do you need a copy of it, Madam Speaker? Okay,
yes,
so
I
if you
do.
allow me just a few minutes, I'll make copies, okay?
Moment's recess.
Thank you.
The legislature's back from recess. Vice Speaker Nelson, Majority Leader, I'm going to go ahead and recognize you at this time.
Citrus Masi, Madam Speaker, I make a motion to recess till 10 a.m. tomorrow morning.
So what time?
10 a.m. tomorrow morning.
10:30.
Okay, 10:30 tomorrow
On that
morning.
motion, without any objections, motion carries.